Okay, so unless you've been living under a rock lately, you probably know what all of these videos are. And so, to keep this simple, this is gonna be a full breakdown of everything that makes this format work so well for all these people, but also whether this is actually something you can leverage to scale your consulting business to that 6-figure per month mark. And if you can't watch a simple video on how you can scale to 6 figures per month with your consulting business, then be prepared to watch this exact same video 3 months from now when this format will have already become saturated. With that said, let's dive in. So pretty much the point of all those videos is to take people from the unaware stage to the problem aware stage, because most people are balancing between, do I stay normal, do I just stick with normal path, college, 9 to 5, die, or do I, take that leap of faith and become rich? This video is for the people who are just, trying to wrestle between the two. So this video is meant to take them from here to completely here. So the paradigm shift happening here is we're taking them from, do I get rich or do I stay normal, to I have to get rich. And the opposite of that is, it's okay to stay normal. And this is very important because all the prompts or the questions or whatever you want to call them on those videos is simply hot takes / beliefs that come from an objection. The objection is simply why people will stay normal. Let me actually drag this. Sorry, I forgot about it. Pretty much reasons as to why someone will say, okay, having a 9 to 5 is okay, being normal is okay, all those things is okay, I do not need to become like anything else, I'm good, and I don't need to get rich. If they believe those things, they're not even gonna watch the rest of our content, they're not even gonna book any call. And so we need to make them believe those things first, otherwise everything is screwed. An example of this is, let's say, I'm afraid this will not work. This then turns into the prompt of, anyone from a first world country can get rich. Pretty much. So this is all the psychology behind the prompts. Pretty simple. Next thing is the guys. So pretty much the people that go on to challenge Brez or whoever the creator is in order to, have an argument, whatever it may be. Now, the first segment of, let's say, archetype, the first archetype that goes on to challenge Brez is who we call the false. The entire purpose of all those individuals is to simply disagree and not at all change their beliefs across the entire debate. So here's the debate start, here's the debate end, and if we represent beliefs with scales, whereas this is when it's false and this is when it's true and this is the belief, theirs does not change at all throughout the entire debate. And so for that to happen, there needs to be a force that, keeps this thing down, even though there's this big, argument and there's just Brez constantly trying to convince them otherwise. So there's got to be this force. And this force, after a certain point, becomes very, very annoying because, this force can be, logical. They can be just, logically countering everything Brez says. But after a certain point, it stops being logical and they're just being stupid. If you've seen the video, you probably know what I'm talking about. So it starts being stupid. And so over time, this stupidity becomes annoying and it starts pissing off the viewer. Now, to give you some more concrete examples of this, what you can see is that they often contradict themselves. So the guy says, oh, I bought your course. Then he says, oh, okay, I didn't. Another one is that they often get flustered. So the girl says, oh, you got no business background. Then, of course, you well know that Brez is running 7-figure businesses. And then the girl says, oh, how can you sell that? This is just coping. This is just, deviating, not being able to clearly make an actual debate. Another one is that they make claims they cannot back up. So the guy says, this is obviously the most retarded of them all. He says, oh, you're a scammer. And then Brez asks, how? And the guy says, oh, I don't know, but you're a scammer. This is just retarded as fuck. And so when they do all those things, what happens is that they're obviously making an incredibly bad argument. And so in the spectrum or in the scale of arguments where we have horrible arguments and elite arguments with people, being at the spectrum depending on their ability to argue, these are people who are able to debate at an elite level. And then we have Brez. Brez is obviously not at that elite level yet, but because the only thing the viewer can see is these people and Brez, what happens is that suddenly Brez's argument seems elite because they cannot compare it to something better. And their argument, the people's argument, becomes much, much weaker because there's nothing worse than that. It seems like completely retarded, especially when the viewer is viewing from a third-person standpoint, which makes them more objective and more logical, which I will touch on in a second. And every time they do one of those things and they become more annoying, as you can see right here, their argument becomes weaker and weaker. And in so, Brez's argument becomes better because this gap is just extending. It doesn't matter where the actual gap is. Of course, we don't want to get to the extremes, but it's extending. So Brez's argument becomes better. And so pretty much this whole thing frames the foils as complete idiots, or especially this guy, retards. And so obviously the viewer does not want to be like these people. And if the viewer is holding a belief that these people are holding, that belief has suddenly become contaminated. And if they hold that belief, if they hold that identity, they're just going to end up like these people. They're just going to be idiots. And so in order to avoid that, they have to believe the complete opposite. And so they're like, oh, I cannot hold the same beliefs because this person is a retard and I don't want to be a retard. So instead of believing courses are scams, they believe courses are legit. And because the experience is a very emotional one, because it's targeting their actual, integrity and the identity, they believe shifts by a lot, of course, depending on the person. And so what this does is that it doesn't completely tip over the scale, but it brings it, let's say, here. Or maybe there is more of a tilt like this, but it's still not here where we want it, where the optimal, belief is. So it needs to fully tip over. And that is where the other archetypes come in, the people who we call the converters. So those people are more similar to the viewer, and of course they are smarter than the retards. They are educated, they're thoughtful, they're skeptic, but they're not twitch yet. So pretty much who Braze ICPs. And so what happens is that when the debate starts, Braze is able to clearly and logically reason and go from courses are scams to you basically proving yourself right through these logical reasoning steps. And because the viewer matches those people, they can relate to them. And so the viewer is reasoning along with them through small paradigm shifts, which do not feel like surrender, but rather reasoning. For example, we start off with courses are scams, and then move on to, okay, college is also kind of a course. And then we move on to, okay, I guess the formula makes sense. And then we move on to, you've basically proven yourself right. And so it's not surrender, it's reasoning. And so the beliefs of those people slightly tip over. And because the viewer is watching this video, as I said previously, from a third person perspective, without any goals, unlike the foes, they don't have any stress, they don't have any goal, and they do not have any very, very heavy bias towards either end of the spectrum, which means that they can simply be more logical when, watching the debate. They are not, biased, they're not very, very subjective, they're more objective and more logical. And when we combine that with the foils being unknowing retards and the converters being relatable, the result is a paradigm shift that feels like their own idea. Let me say that again. They shift their paradigm, but it feels like it's their own idea. It's just brilliant, purely brilliant. Now, watching this, you're gonna have one more question, which I also mentioned in the intro. Should I actually do this? Is this the format that I should do? Well, it depends on this little chart right here. So, essentially, pretty much everybody who starts info, Iman, Charlie Morgan, or even Hormozy, they all start with solution-aware people. So when you start selling info coaching or selling or courses, it doesn't matter, you should start by targeting solution-aware people. People who pretty much know that the solution to their problem is the thing you're teaching. Pretty much, an example of this could be people, wanting to get rich. The problem is I'm not rich. And so they discover, let's say, high-ticket sales. And so they then know that the solution to their problem is high-ticket sales. And so you then go on to create videos that don't get people into high-ticket sales, but rather educate people who are already in the niche. Pretty much. So you start here, which can easily get you to 100k a month. But then you hit a ceiling. And so you then have to expand, because you cannot expand further simply because there's not enough people in the market to facilitate your goal. So you expand, and you target people who are like, okay, I do not know how to get rich. You target people who are problem aware. And you show them that the way they get rich is through high-ticket sales. Pretty much. Same as this video right here. And you use this, and you get to 500k a month, or even $1 million a month. So pretty big numbers. You can get there without targeting unaware people. And so then, again, you are eventually going to hit the ceiling. And that is when you expand to the unaware portion of the market. Say, this video right here, or think of like Andrew Tate or Iman Ghazi speaking to normal civilians who are like on the verge of like, do I stand 9 to 5? Do I get rich? All those things. And that is when you post that video. If you are not here yet, you should not do me versus them format, simply because it's going to target and attract unaware people. But that doesn't mean you cannot leverage the format. What you could do, which is very, very interesting, is slightly tweak the thing. And instead of making it me versus them, it's me helping them. So an example is you do the same thing. You have a bunch of people, those being your ICP. Essentially, you have like a table with a whiteboard and somebody sits across you and you help them solve the problem. That problem is either a mindset problem or a strategy problem. And instead of them telling you what their problems are, on the actual video, what you do is that you make statements, predictions about them, which you get by studying your ICP. Let's say you sell high-ticket sales, consulting or coaching. So one thing you might know about your ICP is that they often get stuck in loops when objection handling. For example, they say this, the prospect say this, they say it again, the whole loop continues repeating. That's one thing you might know. So you say, like a prompt, let's say, I always stuck in loops when objection handling. This is just a very, very bad example. And when you solve that problem, to keep it simple, through the solution, you add little pieces or little nuggets of information that pre-handle objections without making it visible. So broke closers versus 50k a month closer. This is just an example until you get to that point. And the cool thing about this, what happens is that the people you attract with that are people who have already watched such a video like this one, because those people were at a point unaware or problem aware. And so when people create videos like this, many of the people that actually watch those videos, they never buy from them. But they're still, have this like fire in them to figure it out, to get rich. And that is where you come in with much more valuable content. This is the entire philosophy of my mechanism. If you're interested in learning more, you can just book in a call. I don't really care. But in order to do all of this, whether you're doing this one or this format or whatever you're doing, doesn't matter, you have to understand your ICP. Because as I've said about 1 billion times right now, all your funnel really is just a very big paradigm, or let me draw this, paradigm shift. And the way you bridge it to is by creating experiences that go on to be filtered through the current paradigm, and so create beliefs that confirm the aligned paradigm. That's pretty much all it is doing. But unless you know what the current paradigm looks like, you don't know what the experiences are being filtered through. And so you cannot be sure whether you're actually confirming this or you're denying it. You have to know this. So for me to finally get to my point, pretty much what I've done is I've spent way too much time on Cloud, as you can see right here, building out the resource that will allow you to completely synthesize and understand that current paradigm at extreme detail. That way, every single stimulus or experience you put in front of them actually creates the right belief that confirms the aligned paradigm. Something this also helps you create. That way, you have full clarity on exactly who they are right now. Let me show you this. Who you want them to become in order to buy, and also how you, well, where the fuck is this? And the exact paradigm shifts that need to happen between those two in order to get them here. So it's pretty fucking cool. And so if you want this, you can just DM me the word paradigm on Instagram @UNScaler, and I'll send the whole thing to you for completely free. So now with all that said, I hope you got some genuine value out of this video. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me on Instagram, and if perhaps you want to work with us to scale your own info business, you can just book any call straight from the link in the description. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's a sales call. But yeah, terrible pitch, but yeah, take care, bye.